we're not asking younger generations to work where they're getting this life experience. And I think there's so much value in that. But also, it goes back down to the dumbing down of education. And this is what you're talking with TikTok about. One of the biggest surprises to me in the last year in having these conversations about the Roman Empire is I'm finding people just literally they don't know a little bit about it. They know nothing about it. And the reason for that is it would have been a big part of education in the 1800s, so in the 19th century. But what happens is around the time of the Industrial Revolution, they want people to be able to work in factories. So what do? They bring in the Austro-Hungarian education model, which means we need people to be soldiers and work in factories.
Yeah.
We don't need people to think for themselves. We need them to be able to come out and do a certain thing. And so even college or our higher education still doesn't have this idea of learning how to think and learning how to actually look at a problem and solve it. So what we've created are a class of people that don't know how to do, and they don't know how to think. And it creates, kind of this future where no one can actually build the future, right? We're just kind of effect of whatever happens to us.
Yeah, and if you want the proof of that, go back and look at the literature or even the correspondence of like military men from the 1800s, like the Civil War. And it's all laden with references to history that the average, like the military guy today would have no idea about, unless they were really high up. It's fascinating. Like especially the literature, though, you see it there, all these deep references that unless you are educated in that time, or sought it out in this time, you miss most of it. Would just go right over your head.
No, I agree. I totally
and it was a
agree.
normal part of society back in the day, right?
Exactly,
Like I know, like for me, like I went to Catholic school, so like we get educated a little bit differently. And in fifth grade, they had us reading Shakespeare. And I remember like I was just so confused because Old English is hard as heck to understand, and most people are never exposed to that. I think that's part of the problem is it doesn't mean you need to be this like super cultured person, but I think to a certain standpoint, our culture still needs some of those things to exist, or you kind of end up, with, Megan the Stallion and kind of what we gotten at with like where modern music's went, right? Like, and we've just kind of lost what culture is. We get back into, and I think this happens throughout history, right? If you look at, towards the end of the Roman Republic is the Roman Revolution is the rich people all fighting each other. It's not classes against each other. And if you look at the empire, it's a very similar thing. You start to see this developing of two classes of kind of your patricians and your plebeians, and we kind of seem to go back into those classes throughout history. But if you want to look at like how we've gotten there most modernly, I know James Lindsay talks a lot about this. There's a philosopher out of Brazil named Paulo Freire, and he basically took liberation theology, which, by the way, my undergrad degree at Seton Hall, they made us take way too much liberation theology. Like it was kind of crazy, some of the stuff that I had to read in school. And he takes liberation theology, removes the God from it, and he replaces the God with Marxism. So it becomes the ideas behind liberation theology, but replaced with Marxism. Now, one of his students actually goes back to America and brings that into the colleges of education. So since the 1980s, we've been seeing our colleges of education get pervaded with this stuff. And it's this critical consciousness, right? We're not just looking at math problems, but we're looking at, the theme park is this far from, XYZ, and Johnny couldn't go because his family didn't have a car. Okay, but how about solving the math problem? We've gotten to the point where everything's looked at through a critical lens, and it starts with Paulo Freire bringing it through one of his students in the College of Education in the 80s, and it's kind of pervaded through the 80s and the 90s to where we are now.
Yeah, and I think people are starting to wake up to that, but has the damage been done? I mean,
yes and no. I think so. My kids aren't super old. I have a almost 6-year-old, and I have a 3-year-old, and I have a newborn. We started homeschooling thank you. We started homeschooling our 5-year-old last year. And I think what I'm seeing, I live in a lake, and most of the people in our lake community are homeschooling their kids. So I think you are starting to see parents reaching for sanity. Have we hit that critical mass already where it's pervaded? I don't know. But I think the more we see people deciding to opt out of that system, that's why one of the big reasons, I know the Libertarian Party's talked about it, is we have to get rid of the Department of Education, because that's how these things pervade, right? They're getting pushed from the top down because, as you mentioned, they want to make it better for the rich and for the powerful to be where they are and keep people where they are. And that's what this Marxist ideology does. So unless we get rid of that, and a lot of it comes back to us as parents taking responsibility for what our kids are learning, we're never going to get out of that.
Crazy.
come on,
But
man.
even that, like how much more of it is the psychiatric drugging too? Like there's Jim Marrs, if you haven't read any of his books, excellent author, rest in peace. He passed away a number of years ago, but he traces so much of what's happened to us to psychiatric drugging, right? Where people are numb, they can't think for themselves. You look at a lot of school shooters, you're going to find out a lot of times they were on some sort of psychiatric medication. And I just found out yesterday, I know Adam Curry was talking about it in No Agenda, and I didn't know this. Did you know that pilots can't ever have been on any sort of psychiatric medication, whether it's an ADHD drug or anything like that?
Good.
So at the same point in time, they've destroyed our capabilities through a lot of these different drugs too. So we also have that pattern of pharma kind of attacking us too.
Yeah.
I have a friend right now going through a divorce. Super sad, sucks. I feel bad for him. He's been sad on Instagram. Next thing you know, he's like, I'm on antidepressants. You don't need it for that. I'm sorry. I didn't say nothing. I felt bad for him. You know, you got to sit there and understand him. But I want to be like, you're a pussy. You don't need antidepressants because your girl decided to move on, type of thing. And like you said, he don't need it. Now he's on antidepressant. He's feeling great. For how long? How long is he going to be on those pills for?
I'm with you, dude.
Over some
But
bullshit.
and even the science behind it is kind of hooey as well. You know, like we don't actually know all the thing that these SSRIs that they're claiming they do that they actually do. Like we don't know that they're actually helping people in the way they claim. And I know this is one of the last few stories that Tucker did before they pulled him off the air. You know, if you go after pharma, they go after you. And I think the problem we're seeing is they don't want the money to stop, and they're just dumbing down society to make it happen.